The sky turned black at 2:30 p.m., and 104 vehicles never made it home. It was the Friday after Thanksgiving, 1991. Families were heading home. Kids asleep in back seats, leftovers in the trunk, music on the radio. And then, in the space of 6 minutes, 17 people were dead. Not from a flood, not from an earthquake, not from any failure of the road itself, from dust. The largest multi-vehicle pileup in American history at the time, and how a wall of dirt turned a busy California highway into a graveyard in broad daylight. To understand what happened on November 29, 1991, you first need to understand the land. The San Joaquin Valley in Central California is one of the most productive agricultural regions on the entire planet. Stretching roughly 400 kilometers through the heart of California, it feeds much of the nation. Almonds, cotton, tomatoes, grapes. It is flat, vast, and wide open. But in 1991, it was dying of thirst. The valley had just entered its 6th consecutive year of severe drought, the worst stretch in living memory. The rainy season had not yet begun. The soil was bone dry. And crucially, many of the fields lining Interstate 5 near the town of Coalinga had been left fallow, meaning they had been plowed but not planted. No crops, no roots, no vegetation to hold the earth in place. Just loose, dry, powdery soil sitting on both sides of one of America's busiest highways. Scientists who later studied the event wrote that the combination of drought, unplanted fields, and the seasonal winds made a catastrophic dust storm not just possible, but, in their exact words, inevitable. The land was a loaded gun. All it needed was a trigger. The night before November 29th, something was happening far above the clouds. A powerful jet streak. A river of high-speed wind embedded within the jet stream was moving across the region. It measured nearly 1,000 kilometers long, 200 kilometers wide, and carried winds of up to 195 kilometers per hour at an altitude of 9 kilometers above the Earth. As the sun rose on the morning of November 29th and began heating the surface, warm air rose from the ground and mixed with the high-altitude winds, dragging them down toward the surface in a process meteorologists call a mixed layer. But instead of the usual mixed layer height of around 1 kilometer, this one extended 2 to 3 kilometers, pulling those violent, high-speed winds all the way down to the ground. When those winds hit the dry, plowed fields of the San Joaquin Valley, they didn't just blow dust, they scoured it. They ripped it from the earth and launched it into the air in thick, dense, churning plumes. This was not one unified dust storm. It was a series of smaller, violent dust columns erupting across the valley simultaneously, each one capable of dropping visibility to almost zero in a matter of seconds. Wind gusts at the crash site reached 60 to 75 kilometers per hour, and one of those plumes drifted directly across Interstate 5. November 29th was the Friday after Thanksgiving, one of the busiest travel days of the year in the United States. Interstate 5, the main artery connecting Northern and Southern California, was packed with families making the journey home. Among them, a 31-year-old substitute teacher traveling southbound with her husband and their 2 young sons, aged 4 and 1. A family named the Emersons, heading to San Luis Obispo with their children. Hundreds of ordinary people on an ordinary holiday road trip. At approximately 2:23 p.m., the wall of dust hit the highway north of Coalinga, roughly 45 miles north of the town. In the words of meteorologist Mike Kaplan, "All of a sudden, this wall of dust rides right over the highway and nobody can see anything." Cliff Emerson, one of the survivors, described it simply: "Everything was blacked out." In that instant, drivers faced an impossible choice: slow down, and risk being rear-ended by a vehicle coming fast behind you. Maintain speed, and risk smashing into whatever was already stopped ahead in the darkness. This is exactly what the National Transportation Safety Board would later confirm. Different drivers made different decisions in that split second. Some slowed, others didn't, and that difference in reaction was catastrophic. In just 6 minutes, between 2:23 and 2:29 p.m., the deadliest collisions were over. 33 separate crashes, 104 vehicles destroyed, 93 cars and 11 massive semi-trailer trucks crumpled across a 3-kilometer stretch of highway in 5 main collision clusters. Emerson's car slammed into the rear tires of an 18-wheeler. A second truck hit the other side of the same rig. Then, one after another, car after car plowed into the wreckage that had already formed. His wife and children were in the back seat when the vehicle was crushed. Several vehicles caught fire. Some exploded, sending car parts and rocks flying through the air. A young mother, that substitute teacher traveling with her family, was burned catastrophically while trying to pull her children from a car that had lodged beneath a diesel tank and was engulfed in flames. 2 bodies would later be burned so severely they could not be identified. The emergency response to the I-5 disaster was itself a story of extraordinary difficulty. The dust storm that had caused the crash was still raging when first responders tried to reach the scene. A fire truck and an ambulance were each involved in separate collisions while attempting to drive to the accident site through zero visibility conditions. The very storm that had created the disaster was now blocking the rescue. Despite this, first responders managed to reach the remote crash site within approximately 30 minutes. What they found was unlike anything they had seen. A 4-mile stretch of highway on both sides was littered with wreckage. Flattened cars, burned-out trucks, overturned motorhomes. California Highway Patrol Sergeant Ted Eichmann later described big rigs that had entered the dust cloud at 50 miles per hour with zero visibility. Survivors gathered at a Chevron service station 10 miles from the crash, arriving covered in dust. Hair, faces, and clothes completely white with it. A cashier there, named Maria Martinez, said they arrived pale as ghosts, stunned and shaking. A triage area was set up approximately 1 mile east of the freeway, chosen specifically because it had been planted and was not affected by the blowing dust. The most critically injured were airlifted by helicopter to hospitals in Fresno. Those less seriously hurt were loaded onto buses and transported to Coalinga and Fresno hospitals. It took nearly 4 hours for rescue crews to remove all the injured from the wreckage. Emergency personnel spent hours searching through flattened and charred vehicles for victims. 2 bodies were found 6 hours after the accident. Thousands of people, motorists caught in the traffic standstill miles behind the crash, were trapped in their vehicles for nearly an entire day while the highway was cleared. Let the numbers tell the story for a moment. 104 vehicles involved in collisions, 93 cars, 11 semi-trailer trucks. 349 people were in those vehicles. 150 were injured. 17 were killed, making this the deadliest dust storm collision in California history, according to the California Highway Patrol. 118 of the 150 injured remained hospitalized the day after the crash. 150 miles, that's 240 kilometers, of Interstate 5 was closed following the disaster. The highway remained shut for more than 27 hours. It was finally reopened at 7:15 p.m. on Saturday, November 30th. California's Lieutenant Governor Leo McCarthy, who toured the site the morning after, said it was the worst traffic accident he had ever seen. The Deseret News called it the largest vehicle crash in then-recent American history. In the weeks and months that followed, the question everyone was asking was not just how, but why wasn't it prevented? The California Highway Patrol stated publicly that the dust storm had arisen too quickly for them to close the highway or issue warnings in time. But survivors and victims' families told a different story. 34 separate lawsuits were filed against government agencies and corporations involved. Victims argued that both the California Highway Patrol and the State Transportation Authority had known about the high winds and developing dust storm along I-5 long before the collisions occurred, and had done nothing. The National Transportation Safety Board conducted a thorough investigation. Their key finding was significant. Drivers respond differently to sudden visibility loss. Some slow instinctively. Others maintain speed out of fear of being rear-ended. This inconsistency in driver behavior, they found, was a critical factor in the chain reaction nature of the crash, and they identified the same pattern in 5 other comparable incidents. More than 3 years of legal proceedings followed. By March 1995, all but one lawsuit had been settled out of court. The state of California never formally admitted wrongdoing, but it paid millions of dollars in settlements to victims and their families, as reported by the Fresno Bee. This was not California's first encounter with dust storm disasters on the same road. In December 1978, the same stretch of I-5 had seen a similar but smaller incident. 7 people died and 47 were injured in a chain collision under comparable conditions. That warning was not enough. In 1991, the Earth delivered a far harsher lesson. What the I-5 disaster made clear was that natural road hazards, dust, fog, ice, are not merely weather events. They are traffic management emergencies, and they require the same urgency as any other emergency on a highway. In the years following the crash, there was increased attention to variable speed limits, dynamic warning systems, and the practice of proactively closing high-risk stretches of highway when severe conditions are developing. Not after. Disaster has already struck. But the deeper truth the I-5 disaster revealed is this: drought changes roads. When the land is dry and bare, every strong wind becomes a potential weapon. 6 years of drought didn't just damage farms. It turned the fields along one of America's busiest highways into a source of deadly ammunition. 17 people who left home on a normal Thanksgiving weekend never came back. In 6 minutes, in broad daylight, on a clear, sunny afternoon, until it wasn't. That is the story of the 1991 Interstate 5 dust storm. And the next time you see the sky change color on the road ahead of you, remember this. If this story made you think differently about the roads you drive every day, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to RoadXFactor, because every road has a story. Some of them are warnings. Drive carefully out there. I'll see you on the next one.